Well, hello everybody. Welcome to the Gary Neville Podcast, which comes on a Sunday evening to you from the Etihad after a day of 24 goals in 5 games in the Premier League, 6 of which were scored here, Gary, in what I suppose is becoming a kind of typical Spurs game, and how they contributed to this.
Oh, they did. And look, we knew Spurs would cause problems here today with City, but I just thought they'd get beat up and they'd get blown away because I didn't think they would be able to keep City out, and I didn't think City would concede 3. But there was a pattern here today with the Liverpool game, even though it was a very different game, how both sort of away teams played, that City allowed the game to drift. They didn't seem serious enough about the danger that existed in the game. And what that amounts to, without a shadow of a doubt, is a complacency. And that used to happen regularly in seasons where we'd won the league and the year after you come back and our manager used to say, "You're bored." He would walk in at the end of a game like that we would have him say, "I know what hell's up, you're just bored. You're waiting for the big games, but you better make sure that you're involved in that sort of title race come sort of February, March, because don't lose too many points." And there would be warnings like that in this time this season. The problem is with City, we've become accustomed to them not being complacent and not being like this. But there's definitely a pattern now of them sort of, not waking up and sort of just drifting through games, thinking it's going to be easy. In fact, it is easy for them for large parts. And they're conceding goals. I mean, 9 goals. They've conceded 9 goals now in 4 matches, which is so unlike Manchester City. And I couldn't have more admiration for that back four in terms of what they are. The goalkeeper, the Rodri in front. They've got a great 6 players there, and they're not attacking fullbacks anymore. When you talk about Guardiola and Walker, who really stay back and keep quite narrow at times. So how they're conceding those goals, I mean, well done to Spurs. They do attack brilliantly. They're a sort of team that a real box of tricks going forward and do the unexpected and pull you out of position. And City haven't enjoyed that game today defensively at all. And Spurs, without a lot of their really good players, have come here and got a point, and well done to them. They deserved it.
It struck me during the game that you were sometimes stuck on Spurs between admiring their pluck and their refusal to compromise, and maybe sometimes a feeling that genius had turned into madness. After it all, where are you on that kind of scale?
The same place, probably. Same as I was against Chelsea the other week when they played against 9 men, and they played with 9 men, and we were like, what have we just witnessed? I mean, they got beat in the end, but it was just bizarre for so much of the game against Villa. They could have been 3 or 4 up in the first 20 minutes. Today, I thought they could have been 4-5-1 down at half-time. Haaland's missed 2 absolute sitters in the first half. That he doesn't miss both of those in a game again this season. But you're right, there is an element of madness, but there is an element of brilliance about how Spurs play. There is no doubt about that. You can't come here and do what they've done and play the level of football that they've done. And Ange Postecoglou's only had a very limited amount of time with his club and these players. And actually, he's got 5 or 6 of his best players missing that would be playing here today. So to have them playing like that in a very short period of time, a few months in, to have them showing the courage. One thing that I can never, ever question about this Spurs team is the courage to play. And sometimes it goes into madness when you're angry, actually, with Basuma, when he just turns into 3 players in his own, 15 yards outside his own area. And I suppose that's the sort of risk, and you said they sort of a team that dare. They do dare. And I do criticise them, because I did criticise them when Basuma did that. But then I've been bored by them for the last few years, playing rigid, boring football that's been sort of unexciting. And I have to say, what I'm watching at the moment I really like, and it's a lot of fun. And Pep Guardiola said this game would be a lot of fun. And the fun is Spurs because of how they play and what they bring to a game. So well done to the manager, well done to the players, and well done, really, to be fair, to keep going in a situation whereby many of us would have criticised them heavily if they'd got done here 4-5-1 today and called them naive.
And if they can survive the Christmas period, which ain't easy with so many players missing, if they can and just be on the fringe of it, do you think they can still be in a sort of big-time conversation come the spring?
In terms of the league?
Yeah.
No, they're not. They won't be. No, I said that when they were top of the league. I'm absolutely sort of unmoved on that. When they were sort of a few points clear a month or 2 ago now, I was absolutely, they won't win the league. And they probably may not finish in the Champions League. But then I never expected them to finish in the Champions League. So I think what they're doing now is almost coming back to par and where they probably should be. And I think you'll see a level of inconsistency from them, and they'll be conceding goals in games. They'll drive you nuts in some games, but they'll be blowing you away and thinking, wow, they're the best team to watch in the league, and you want the Spurs game every single week on Colcom because it's just exciting, and that's how I feel at the moment. You can't watch a game that is not exciting, and I'm doing the game next week against Newcastle. I'm already looking forward to it because it'll be brilliant. But what I would say is that I think they'll settle down into sort of between 4th and 6th. 4th would be punching. I think it'll be sort of 5th, 6th in the league is where they'll end up. But you never know. And if they get all their players fit, and particularly their 2 centre-backs, they're big losses. I mean, you're playing out there today, with 2 full-backs, and not even your first, choice full-back. Ben Davies isn't the first choice left-back. So you're playing out there today with sort of Emerson Royale and Ben Davies at full-backs against Erling Haaland. That's a mismatch. And yet they've got through the game. They've conceded 3, yes, but they pulled a point out of the game and they deserve a lot of credit for it.
Now, you referred a little earlier in the conversation to those days when the manager used to tell you off for being bored. Generally speaking, you still went on to win the league. Do you expect the same of City?
Look, I've said Arsenal are going to win the league this season. And what I've seen from Arsenal so far is that they've not been at the best football-wise. But that gives me more confidence they're going to win the league. Because I honestly think that to win the league through playing beautiful, pretty football, that's not what happens. You have to slog it out through periods of the season where you don't play well. And in the last 10 games of last season when they weren't at the best, they couldn't dig in to get results. What they've done in the first 10, 15 games of this season is when they've not been at the best, is amassed the most points of anyone in the league. Now imagine if the football comes. Imagine if the beauty exists in the football, which it will, and it will come. But they're more powerful, they're more strong. And I just feel that they've got a real chance this year. I do feel they've got a real chance. But for Manchester City, if they decide that they want to turn up and they decide that they want to play at the level that they can and demonstrate that they've got that edge back at any point in the next 2 or 3 months before February, March, then they'll go and win the league. City are the best team, they've got the best squad, and they've got the most experience, and they've got a manager who wins and wins and wins. So there's no one going to be surprised at the end of the season if they sat there at the top of the league. But what we're seeing is what I thought we would see at the start of the season when I said Arsenal would win the league, that we'll see those Paul's treble blues, that you've reached utopia in football terms. An absolute mesmerising height that they're never going to reach again, probably. And after that, everything becomes a little bit inferior in experience. And you think, well, how do I get going again? You don't think that, but you feel it. And we had it after, we won the league after 99, but in 2000 we didn't win the Champions League. It was a bit flat when we won the league in 2000, 2001. And sometimes you have to lose the league to feel that excitement again, to win it again. And what we're seeing from City at the moment is a team that's playing like they need to lose to win again. And I think the crowd also, they've been so blessed with everything that they've seen here. But we've just seen 2 huge games against Liverpool and Tottenham. And it's been difficult for the crowd to get up. Now, we thought a week last Saturday it was because of the fact it was a 12:30 kickoff coming back after internationals. And everyone was a little bit sleepy. But today it was a little bit flat as well. And Pep Guardiola mentioned it. And this is an ex-United player sticking the knife into City fans and the atmosphere. I'm not going down that route. They know. They've created great atmospheres here in the last few years. And when you climb in the mountain, you do create a great atmosphere. And we used to have it at Old Trafford where there was sometimes you go out onto the pitch and there'd be an expectation, go on, entertain us. You're the best. We expect to see goals. And yeah, they'll get up for it if you score goals. But if it's 0-0 and the game's drifting a little bit, they'll go quiet. And they'll go for a pint. And they'll go for a bag of crisps. And they'll start chatting to each other. Because it's not what they're normally there to see. And that happens when you've got success in your life. And what we're witnessing at the moment from City is complacency and just that little edge missing. And it's natural. And it's not a criticism again. It's natural what we're seeing because it's human nature.
So that brings us to the next stage of the conversation, which is off the back of a weekend where they've both won narrowly. Have Arsenal and Liverpool the wherewithal to pounce on that, to capitalise?
Liverpool I'm not sure about, but then they've got Klopp. So I think that's a factor because he can win, and he's proven he can win. Arsenal have still got to demonstrate in a run-in, and they've got to get to that run-in first, but they look like they're on track to be in a run-in again, that they can handle a run-in. I'm more confident that this year they'll handle a run-in than they did last year because Last year there's no doubt they went under and they didn't have enough. Mentally, physically, tactically, defensively, in every single sense, they failed in that run-in. But I think they have got more this season, more experience of what happened last year. Sort of what happens then when you go through that second one is that you think, well, we've experienced it last year, come on, we can't do that again. And you sort of you feel a little bit more free by the fact of what's happened before. I think Arsenal have got what it takes to win a league. I think that group of players are very, very good. The Cities are exceptional, but they're not at the level. If they're not at the level, then someone else can take you over. That happened to us at times. So there's a lot to play for. The more points City drop, the more confidence Arsenal will gain. They'll not, by any stretch of the imagination, get carried away and think that it's theirs by a long shot. But what I would want to see is Arsenal and City in a running again. If Liverpool are there as well, it becomes a 3-horse race, great. But usually at the end, in the last 5, 6, 7, 8 games, it becomes 2. And if it's Arsenal and City again, it'd be interesting to see what happens this time. And interesting to see how Arsenal handle it. I do feel they'll handle it better.
Okay, so much for that race. I think everybody who listens to the Gary Neville podcast would expect to hear this weekend Gary Neville again on the subject of Manchester United.
Do we have to?
Well, no, you don't. It's your podcast. But they lost at Newcastle. What did you make of it?
Oh, it was poor, wasn't it? It was a poor performance, really poor performance. 1-0 doesn't really sort of tell the story. I remember going to Juventus once in 95 or 96 and we got beat 1-0 and it felt like a 7-0. And that must have been what that United group of players felt like yesterday, because they were never in the game. And 1-0 makes it look really sort of narrow and tight. But inconsistency in every walk of life undermines you. You lose faith and trust in each other. And they're so inconsistent. They're so up and down. They're so erratic from game to game, from half to half. And the problem is there is a real pattern of them not turning up in big games away from home now that you can't shake off. They've got Anfield, I think. They've got Chelsea at home on Wednesday night, which will be tough enough. But then Bournemouth, and then I think Anfield the Sunday after, which obviously we're doing that game. And those games sort of like the damage of last season. And it's okay saying they'll be concentrating on Chelsea, but in the back of their minds, they'll also think that game's coming up away from home and what's going to happen there. Honestly, I think at the moment, we've been here before. It feels like sort of a Groundhog Day, doesn't it? Where the players sort of look a little disinterested at times. The body language is poor. The performances are average. The manager starts to come under criticism. The recruitment department start to get battered. The owners start to, obviously, from a continual period, sort of, they've still not done their business in respect of the ownership. Whether that happens this week or next week, I'm not sure, but it seems like it's imminent. And they're stuck. They're stuck in a cycle of failure relative to the money that's been spent and the size of the club and the previous success. And it won't change until there is real structural change. I've said it time and time again, there is no point in shouting anymore. I sat at home last night, as I always do with Manchester United if I'm not doing the game, with excitement and hope, because that's what you do as a fan of a football club. And you start to watch the game, and even at half-time you're thinking, that was a really poor first half. They'll be better in the second half, but they're not.
Was that surprising to you, only in the context of the week they've just had? Because if we cast our minds back to last Sunday morning, they had 3 big, noisy away games on the trot.
Yeah.
And they actually dealt with angry Everton very, very well.
Yeah.
Okay, they made mistakes in Istanbul, which cost them important points, but it was not as bad as yesterday. And it felt as though they sort of had a momentum, and they did have a bit of a core and a bit of something about them, and it just didn't happen at Newcastle.
The problem is, if you just knock them off track slightly, like Istanbul will have done, and the fact that they may not qualify for the Champions League, probably won't qualify for the Champions League next round, they don't react well. They sort of, it knocks them completely. And then you start to think about that Everton game. They should have been level at half-time, Everton. In fact, Everton should have been 2 or 3 up. I mean, they had real good chances, didn't they? So you start to look back then at the games where even they have won 3-0 and question that. And all I would say is that you can play poorly and win. But Manchester United have been doing that now for a long time. And I was critical of Louis van Gaal at Manchester United, and I felt as though his football didn't suit the club and how Manchester United should play, which I think is more like the Klopp style of play. And obviously, I'm going to choose a current manager rather than go back to how we used to play. I'm going to use a current manager that plays really electric football, fast pressing, high tempo, get it forward, a bit more direct. And I can't think of a team since Louis van Gaal. Louis van Gaal dominated football matches at Manchester United. There was a style of play. Since Louis van Gaal, I don't think I've seen a pattern of play established, and that's probably 7 or 8 years now. And I've seen the same type of football, irrespective of who the manager is. No manager has been able to sort of settle on a style of play, and it goes something like counter-attack, moments, maybe dominate against lesser teams at Old Trafford and look like you can play a little bit, but don't kid us, because every time you play against a top team you get done. And that's been the same for 7 or 8 years. There's only Louis van Gaal since Sir Alex Ferguson has been able to implement a style of play at the club. Every other manager, whether it be Jose Mourinho, Ole Gunnar Solskjaer, David Moyes was there for a short period, and now obviously Erik ten Hag's been there for 18 months. And what really damages the likes of, say, Erik ten Hag and Ole Gunnar Solskjaer and Jose Mourinho is they've all spent 300-400 million quid. But De Zerbi at Brighton and Postecoglou at Spurs and others like them have come in, and in 3 or 4 months they've got them playing like Real Madrid. So that's the problem they've got, because it's been shown that you can come in and have an impact upon players and a pattern of play and a style in 3 or 4 months, and we're still sat here sort of 8 years after Louis van Gaal leaves and haven't seen a pattern of play, a combination that you see repeatedly. I saw Paul Scholes talking this morning, and it was really interesting about how he knew where players were. We did play on clockwork. He knew exactly where everyone was on the pitch. Now, we played together a long time, and there was a set system of play. But that's football. Those Spurs players out there today, forget the fact that we played for 10 years together and we had a set system of play and clockwork, and we knew full well that if Dennis Irwin played it into Paul Scholes, I knew he was on the half turn and I was going right back because he was going to switch the play to me. And he was going to switch the play to David Beckham maybe, and I'd go on the overlap. And that's it. You know, and on the other side, you'd see other systems of play. I'd knock it into Roy Keane, he'd nip it round the corner into Dwight York's feet, pop it off to David Beckham, and then you just knew. I can see it now in my head. Out here today, I can watch 2 teams, one manager who's been here many years and a manager who's been here many months, a few months, and I can tell you exactly what their patterns are and what they're going to do. And the players on the pitch know where their next pass is. I can't tell you in the last 8 years, and that's why I'm not just including Erik ten Hag in it, I can't tell you Manchester United's style of play or pattern of play under Jose Mourinho, Ole and Erik ten Hag. I don't know why that is, because they're not all bad managers. They're good managers. They've had real success at other clubs, maybe not Ole as much. He obviously came in a little differently. But they've all had real sort of successful patterns. Erik ten Hag at Ajax created some of the most beautiful football. But he comes to Old Trafford and spends a lot of money, and he's incapable of implementing that style of play. And we can argue he's got a couple of injuries here or there, but Postecoglou's come here today with half a team and played. They've played, and they've had courage to play. So it's well below par. It's really disappointing. I feel like we're in a cycle of, to be fair, we're now starting, or that the noise against the manager is starting to occur. There is then those same noises that say, well, surely we can't get rid of another manager. We've got to get rid of the players because they're the ones that have got rid of the other managers. And then we turn to the owners, and I'm bored. I've become tired of my own club. I don't want to do their games anymore. I don't want to watch their games anymore. And that is the saddest indictment that you can have of your football club, when you become bored of watching them, when you become tired of watching them. And it's not just me. A couple of people in the last couple of weeks, enough's enough. I know, and the daft thing is, Peter, on Wednesday night, I'll build my whole Wednesday night around watching Manchester United, because that's life. We go and watch them again, don't we?
That's fanhood.
That's how I feel today. I feel tired of watching them, and that's a sad position to be in, because I love that club and I love the excitement of football, but I'm already fearing what's going to happen at Anfield in 2 weeks, just purely because I think that it could be a mess. I'm already fearing what's going to happen on Wednesday night against Chelsea, because it could be a mess. And there's no confidence. They've lost our confidence. The whole club has lost our confidence as fans. And in the media now, we just don't trust them either, because the reality of it is they fall below par time and time again. And not good enough. Definitely not good enough.
Just finally, Gary, out of balance, I'm sure Newcastle fans listening to this would want you to hear a word about them, because a bit like Tottenham, they're playing with half a team at the moment.
Excellent. Absolutely excellent. And they've been excellent for 12 months. And I couldn't be happier, really. I say I couldn't be happier because I went up there for 10 years when it was pretty depressing. And I used to go up there and think, driving, it's the hardest ground to get to for me. Because 2 hours to London, I'm at all the grounds. You're like 3.5 hour drive out to Newcastle. On the way back, you get stuck on that bridge. And I used to think, I'm 7.5 hours in the car here going up there today. The fans are going to be demotivated. The stadium's going to be flat. The football's going to be crap. And the result's probably going to be poor. That was Newcastle under Mike Ashley, where expectation had been driven down, just like the Glazer family have driven it down at Manchester United, to a point now whereby it's abysmal. And yet now there is a real passion, a real spirit in the stands, on the pitch, and they deserve that, those Newcastle fans. And, you know, I always talk about right backs, but Trippier epitomises them. He's spirited, he's a fighter, he's experienced. I just like the way they play. I think Eddie Howe is such a solid man, such a good coach, and I'm glad that he's having success. There's a trust up there now in terms of what they're doing. They've got Dan Ashworth off the pitch, who is a highly competent operator in football clubs, proven at the FA what he did there in terms of, I think, transforming England's sort of culture over the last 5, 6, 7 years in the men's and women's game. Then you've got him at Brighton. He goes to Brighton and works on that sort of what would be that conveyor belt of talent there. Then it's obviously continued since he's left. And then you look at what he's done at Newcastle. That sort of what would be stability that exists and those common sense, sound business decisions through football decisions, the connectivity of both, where you want someone who's going to say no to a manager who wants a player that he shouldn't have, which Manchester United's sporting department and executive don't seem to be able to ever say no to a manager that wants a player. It's almost like everything's emotion at Manchester United. The manager has a little bit of success, then all of a sudden the manager becomes chief scout, head of recruitment, sporting director all in one, because they've not got the strength above. It all needs to change. And Newcastle are the opposite. They've got really, really good sound decision making. The challenge will come when they want to maybe make that next step and they want to spend a bit more money to sort of try and bring that little extra bit of talent in, which they've got talent already, but they'll know what I mean by that. I think you know what I mean by that. But Gordon, fantastic. Trippier, fantastic. Guimaraes, fantastic midfield player. The spirit of the team, their work. And they battered Manchester United last night. They absolutely battered them. And they're in a really good position. In the league. And they've done really well. And, it's taken the time, but it's taken a change of ownership to get to that point whereby that feeling's changed and the performances have changed.
Lovely. And next weekend, of course, we'll be speaking after Spurs against Newcastle, as you mentioned, which
we'll look forward to it.
Should be a really good game. Gary, thanks you very much, and thanks to everybody else for listening.
Thank you.